Support for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. BlueCross and BlueShield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by Sonoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
So what's that saying about a rising tide that floats all boats? It is certainly metaphorically used when describing the economy, among other things. But is the sixth year of a commercial expansion democratically distributed? Of course not, and it usually never is, but doesn't that uneven distribution of growth and good fortune also create opportunity? Welcome again to the most widely watched source of Carolina business and public policy for almost 25 years now. I'm Chris William, and are we missing our cue on important opportunities like real transportation and infrastructure reform in South Carolina while the economy is good, or forward momentum in North Carolina's economic development machine? No doubt we will talk about it with those who are most informed, and later on, South Carolina's star quarterback in economic development, Commerce Chief Bobby Hitt.
Major funding also by NOVANT Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care when and where you need it. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. And by BlueCross and BlueShield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. On this edition of Carolina Business Review, Roger Schrum of Sonoco, Bob Morgan from the Charlotte Chamber of Commerce, and special guest, Bobby Hitt, South Carolina's Secretary of Commerce. Now, here's Chris William.
Well, happy summer. Welcome to our program, guys. Good to have you both here.
Thank you.
Smiling, happy, good economy,
Absolutely.
right? Bob, not to be overly dramatic about this, but the debate in North Carolina is pretty acrimonious when it comes to economic development, the use of incentives. I got to think that part of it has something to do with that South Carolina has been banging on all 8 cylinders and had a string of economic development, which we'll talk about. And I want to bring a quote in because I think this is completely appropriate. Martin Luther King once said that we are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. So to apply that to an economic development dialogue in North Carolina, how critical is it that the Old North State gets this economic development done, right, and behind them? And how long will it take the Tar Heel State to catch back up, not just with South Carolina, but in general for where they need to be?
Chris, in Charlotte, we're coming off of 2 record years of job growth, and so the economic development program has worked. A lot of that is based on past reputation. The other side of that coin is for the last 7 or 8 months, North Carolina has been without an economic development incentives strategy. That is being debated at the time that we sit here taping this show. Perhaps we'll know the answer before the legislative session is out. Hopefully there'll be some action on incentives. We are in a crisis. We are losing specific projects who we cannot give an answer to. Hopefully that will be changed soon. But we also are affecting our reputation as a state historically very highly rated by Site Selection Magazine and others as a state that's willing to compete for good economic development. That reputation is being challenged because the consultants and others who have worked with us in the past, we don't have the answer to give them now, and it will take some time. I don't know how long. In the short term, again, hopefully legislation will pass this summer that puts us back in the game, reauthorizes the Jobs Development Investment Grant, which is our primary vehicle. Hopefully that will not have limitations on its use in the urban areas that put us at competitive disadvantage. That's the short-term opportunity, and then longer-term, we just need to get back in the game and be there consistently.
Which, is a good point. So you talk about having some wins in Charlotte, but your contemporaries in Charlotte or Raleigh or Western North Carolina or Wilmington, as you have projects in the pipeline and you have almost commitments, but North Carolina has not gotten to the point where they have some real answers or money in the JDIG program, as you talk about. How punitive is that to the projects that are right there on the edge that you're waiting to get a yes on?
Well, look, the urban-rural divide has gotten ugly. It's been out on the table, and there's a lot of hostility to the prosperity of the largest urban areas that are growing much faster than the rural areas. The fact is, the projects we're dealing with, it is very rare that a company is considering Charlotte and a part of rural North Carolina. The converse of that tends to be true, and so it's really a false argument that if we can take away from the large growing metro markets, it's going to help the rural areas. It's really hurting the state when you put limitations on any of us. But that's the debate that we're dealing with.
So, Roger, welcome to the program. In the interest of full disclosure, Sonoco is a supporter and has been a longtime supporter of this program. Roger, let me ask you this. So, Bob uses terms like critical and hurting the state, and you could certainly say that about transportation in South Carolina. There was some real hope during the legislative session that there would be movement and real solid progressive move about how to fund the state's biggest woes when it comes to roads, not just transportation, but roads. Again, question is, how punitive is that to economic development and to manufacturers?
Well, I think it's extremely punitive. And while something probably is going to be done, we'll probably have more money going into infrastructure this year. It's a one-time deal. What we were trying to look was a longer-term fix for infrastructure so that there was more revenue consistently going in to improve the roads of South Carolina, which by all surveys and review are in the poorest shape in the Southeast. And what they mean for a company like Sonoco is we have 200 trucks a day that come in and out of our manufacturing operations in Hartsville. And quite frankly, it's costing us roughly on an annual basis about $4.5 to $5 million in extra cost because there's many bridges that we can't put our trucks over as we're heading to our customers or back from our customers, or just the wear and tear that's going on with regards to the infrastructure of our truck fleet. So there's true penalty that's occurring right now and will continue until we have a longer term fix. Again, I think we all believe that there will be, because we have excess revenue this year, that there'll be some money put at infrastructure, but is it a one-time deal versus a longer term fix?
Well, and you can talk about widening I-26 to make it less congested when you're going from Columbia down to the low country, but to your point, and in light of a lot of the recent economic development, great economic development announcements in the Palmetto State, when does when do you hit a tipping point with bad transportation, and when does it start to affect economic development?
Well, I think you're going to see it shortly. I mean, I'm really very concerned about the impact it's going to have on actual growth, and then people starting to make moves to areas where they can have better access in and out. We focused very hard a few years ago on our port facilities, yet we've got an extremely congested I-26 that leads from the port all the way up to the upstate, and we're not working to fix that issue. You can have a great port, you can have great manufacturing facilities in the upstate, but if you don't have infrastructure in between, you're gonna get hurt in the process. So again, what business as well as many in the state look for was a longer term solution, which again, we'll have something that works this year, but it won't be a long-term fix.
Just quick 30 seconds. Are toll roads the answer to congestion? And I know that's probably a sensitive issue in Charlotte, but can toll roads fix some of these problems?
We think so. We certainly hope so, and we need for the first toll road in our region, which will be I-77 from the center city of Charlotte to the Lake Norman area. It's been approved. Dirt will be flying this summer. We think that's the best long-term answer to get additional capacity onto our roads. If successful, again, as we think and hope that it will be, we will see tolls used elsewhere in the Charlotte region. We're 2 million people in our metropolitan area. We're going to double to 4 million over the next 20 or 30 years. We need new capacity. If there's a better answer, bring it on, but it's what's happening, what's being used in Texas and Florida and other markets with which we compete.
Can tolls fix that issue in South Carolina?
No, we've got the lowest gasoline tax in the Southeast by a significant amount between Georgia as well as North Carolina. What we needed was a small incremental increase in the gasoline tax to help pay for longer-term solutions for infrastructure. Tolls is not going to answer the solution. We've had tolls in a small operation in the upstate that's been a total mess. So really what we need is just more ongoing revenue into the infrastructure.
Yeah, I suspect our guest is going to have some opinions on some of these issues that we've been talking about. We're going to bring them on in just a second, guys. Thank you. Next 2 weeks on this program, we talk about commerce in North Carolina, and we're going to hear from the horse's mouth to some degree. He is the Secretary of Commerce in North Carolina. John Skvarla will be on this program in 2 weeks. And then in 3 weeks, David King from LABCORP out of Burlington, North Carolina, the CEO and chairman of publicly traded company LABCORP. And then a superintendents of education from both North and South Carolina together, Molly Spearman and June Atkinson, talking about, surprise, surprise, education and the critical nature of it. You know, this may sound a little patronizing, but it's a fact, and that is the Palmetto State is lucky to have our guest filling a cabinet-level job. He has DNA in journalism, in law, in manufacturing, and one of the state's best corporate successes and employers, BMW. Since 2011, he has clocked countless miles and hours globetrotting and setting core strategy for South Carolina's Department of Commerce. We welcome the Secretary of South Carolina's Department of Commerce, the Honorable Bobby Hitt. Your Honor, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you very much.
I got to ask you this. How have you been able to stack up such a string of successes? Volvo is just the latest, but going all the way back to BMW and between, how do you do that? How did you do it?
Well, I think we put together a great team, quite frankly, and team for me is from the county level all the way up to the state level. We invigorated that team. We did it with the way we did funding for our regions. There's always a debate about public-private partnerships. Well, we did one in South Carolina, nobody noticed. But I fund the regional alliances through the Department of Commerce. They have to match it with local dollars. So $5 million was put out and got matched by $5 million of private money. That's our marketing fund, and we do all our marketing on a regional basis rather than on a state basis. And why not? The regions know best what they need and what kind of companies they can best attract. And so all of the regions meet in my office about every 6 weeks. We pool some money. We plan our strategy around the world and where we're going. We're very aggressive in our international markets. In fact, I think we've been leading the country on a per capita basis the last several years on foreign direct investment. You know, it's sometimes when you can't find the right audience in your own country, you go to another country and open up a new audience. And South Carolina has been in Europe now for 40 years, and we've been in Asia for the better part of about 20 years. And we're finding great success there.
Yeah. Bob?
Mr. Secretary, welcome. And I'd like to ask you about regionalism. And we share a couple of assets in the Charlotte Airport and the Port of Charleston, where more of Charlotte's product flows than from any other. What does regionalism look like from your seat in selling South Carolina?
Well, Charlotte's a big part of our regional sale in this part of the state. You know, we've been pretty successful here, working hard to drag Charlotte into South Carolina. And it's a natural growth of a metropolitan area, and they do a great job in Charlotte. And the Charlotte Airport is a major asset. It's the only international flights we have in South Carolina are in Charlotte, and so we sell from that. Sharon Decker, when I knew Sharon pretty well, and she and I had a number of meetings, and we talked about some ways that we could do some regional activity. You know, our two states joined together on tourism and work together on tourism. We think there may be some ways we can work here. We need to sort of walk in the water slowly, I think. There's still a lot of contentiousness across that line. I find the line to be a stumbling block for us sometimes. Recently, in one of our successes in South Carolina, one of the things I realized was we were selling Charlotte wrong, because we're South Carolina. So I brought some of your colleagues in from Charlotte and asked them to help us sell a client. And they know Charlotte, and they sold Charlotte. So people who live in the South Charlotte area, as I call it, that's in the South Carolina region, Charlotte's a big part of the draw. You know, our friends in York County and in Lancaster County, They get it. They're working hard on their transportation systems. They contribute local money to try to keep up with transportation, realizing they have a certain advantage of being where they are vis-a-vis Charlotte, and I think they're capitalizing on it, and they're a great part of our team.
Right.
Congratulations, Secretary Hitt, on the Volvo win. That's huge for the state. Everyone's very excited about it. Key element for that was infrastructure development. You've talked to the legislature about monies that will go for that, but it brings up the broader issue of infrastructure improvement within the state and what it means for economic development. What's your view on that as well?
Well, I look at the overall infrastructure of the state as key. I would tell you that the success in economic development starts with, like most real estate projects, location first, workforce. If you have those two issues, you generally can start to have a conversation. The next thing is going to be logistics, if you're talking about manufacturing. Those three elements are an essential part of any discussion about a plant location of any kind. So when we look at logistics, I look at it in the big macro view. We've got the port. We've committed ourselves to deepening it, building a new terminal. The railway division is under the Department of Commerce. We're building an intermodal park. We have the inland port up here in the, I say up here in the upstate, nearby in the upstate of South Carolina. And all of these things have sent signals to the world how important we are. Clearly, we've got to improve the road systems in South Carolina. We all agree what the outcome needs to be. We're still wrestling over how we're going to pay for it. And this is not just a South Carolina conversation. It's been a North Carolina conversation. It's been an American conversation. And so, as I like to joke, like Churchill said about America, we are a subset of that. We generally get things right after we try everything else. And so we're still debating the best way to pay for it. I think there is consensus in the state about a gas tax. There's some difference of opinion on how much and how it would be applied and so forth. And there's also some governance issues. But these are the normal views of how government sort things out. My position has simply been, we'll do what we can to raise the revenue in the state, and I'll get out of the way and let y'all figure out how to spend it. So I try to stay out of the policy issues as much as I can.
Sorry to interrupt you, but and I don't want to put any words in your mouth, Mr. Hitt, but is there a level of frustration, and does it become punitive for economic development? You know, you've had this string, but all of a sudden transportation's not where it needs to be. Does it keep you, do some of the other projects at risk in the pipeline because you don't have X and Y done?
I don't know that it keeps us from working the pipeline. I think it goes back to what Roger said, some of the complaint he had about some of the secondary road bridges and so forth that can't carry the weight loads. We hear those complaints, as do all of our legislators. So everyone knows we have to fix it. And we know that we have to find the ways and means to do it. The good fortune we have in South Carolina is we've got new money. And so sometimes new money elevates the conversation a little bit more, and it doesn't help you get through it. But we'll get through it, and I feel pretty confident. We have, I think everyone agrees that we need to have the outcome, and I believe you'll see sometime in the next 6 to 8 months there'll be a good solution. It needs to be a long-term one.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask you to look beyond the Carolinas. Where's the competition the strongest, and what can we learn from, whether it's Georgia? Atlanta still is strongly competitive in many of the projects we're dealing with, but where do you see some best practices that we ought to learn from?
So you want me to tell you who our toughest competition is? I think Tennessee is a very hard state to go up against. They have really a good tax model, and they have very aggressive partners and allies in their economic development system there. Georgia is always, I keep an eye mostly on Georgia and North Carolina, and the reason is it's all the same dirt and it's the same people. We're all related to each other. We all know each other. We fuss and fight over our lines, but we all know each other pretty well. And we have a lot of common qualities about each other. As you mentioned, Charlotte, the airport, the port of Charleston. The Port of Charleston is a port for the whole Southeast, just as we see Charlotte as an airport for this whole region. So there are many things that we can work together on. I think that I like to see the entire Southeast being as strong as it possibly can. I think there are more things that we can do. When we talk to international companies, they're talking about the southeastern United States. We have to work pretty hard to edge out North Carolina and pretty hard to edge out Georgia, and we don't all the time. We work on it. We look for the ones that we think we can do the best job with, and then we focus on that. Obviously, when you look at something like Volvo, we had, I think, a pretty strong story. We've had a great success with BMW. We negotiated about 90 to 100 days ago, a new plant for Mercedes-Benz vans. We have about 250 automotive companies clustered in the state now. So this is a good place to come and rebirth yourself, which is exactly what Volvo wants to do. They have a view of where they fit in the premium niche, and they think South Carolina can help them get there. The Port of Charleston's key to it. The supplier base is key to it, and also the attitude in South Carolina is key to it. We're a little bit smaller. We work pretty hard.
Key issue for economic development as well as workforce development. Recent survey was kind of interesting to me. It said that 7 out of 10 adults believe that manufacturing jobs are very important to the United States as well as to the region. Yet 3 out of 10 would recommend those types of jobs to their children. How the heck do we start improving the opinion of manufacturing jobs if most people still believe they wouldn't want their kids going into those types of jobs?
I don't want to sound comical, but I come from manufacturing, at least for the last half of my career, and I complain to manufacturers all the time. You're like a Masonic temple. You got no windows, doors, you don't let anybody in, and then you complain when no one wants to work there. We need to bring the public back into what modern manufacturing looks like. We're doing that. We started that program. You'll see us unveil some things pretty soon to do it even more. But many of us, including those of us of the age in this room, came along where our parents told us to get an education, stay out of the mill. Now the mill's changed. The mill's not dirty anymore. You walk in clean, you leave clean, and you have to use your brains all day long. If you're making a 9-speed automatic transmission, it's not a road activity. It's a very concentrated activity, and we're making 1,200 of them a day in Lawrence County, South Carolina right now with ZF Corporation. So the modern advanced manufacturing world requires a different caliber of person, and we need to get that to the parents. Actually, one survey we did showed that the parents think one thing, the students think another thing, and the employers think yet another. So we need to bring that connect together. Can we do that? The answer is yes, and it takes a concentrated strategy. Commerce is now, our Commerce Department has now been brought into that. Last year, the legislature took a program of Pathways to Progress and moved it to Commerce. So I now have 12 educational professionals working with me to build the bridges between business and the education community, and we've started doing that. And I think we'll see some good results. We're also working with a number of parallel organizations to try to bring that about. We have to get people to see where the opportunities are. And I will tell you, most parents want what all parents want. They want their children to be happy. Well, one of the key ingredients in being happy is having a job. And we can create good jobs. And I've had people ask me, well, where are we going to get all these people in the workforce from? And I remind them that we had no auto workers until BMW came. And we generated now 9,000 people at BMW, thereabouts. There's about 25,000 in the supplier system. There was no one in South Carolina who knew how to build jets, and there are now 7,500 people at Boeing. So one of the things we have, and the whole Southeast has it, all of the Southeast states have very good job skills development programs. Charlotte's got some wonderful programs going on here between the technical colleges and K through 12 and the integration with business. We can create that. That's one of our strongest selling points in the Southeast. We can make a workforce. It's going to become more intense in the future because the complexity of our plants are going to be more intense in the future, and therefore this is something we need to start on now.
We've got about a minute and a half left. I want to follow that idea of aerospace and automotive manufacturing a little bit farther. And let's say South Carolina's had huge wins. How do you make sure that it doesn't become cautionary tale like Detroit, where you've got such a concentration in aerospace and automotive that you're at risk when there is the next downturn?
Well, I think we have a fair amount of diversity, and that aerospace and automotive are substantially different value chains, even though they have some crossover. Right now, I think a lot of focus from my point of view is the value chain, so that, for instance, we now have carbon fiber coming. We'll have the only full carbon fiber plant in North America will be in Spartanburg, South Carolina. What needs to be next door to it? What else will that carbon fiber go to other than Boeing, and what other companies can we bring to make sure those companies work well? This is exactly what Sonoco does. Sonoco is in a wonderful rural area and has been able to string together a whole variety of value chains to be successful over a long, long period of time and adapt and change. So I think when I look back 25 years, middle of my lifetime, we were primarily a textile and tobacco state with a heavy dose of tourism. Now we are an aerospace and automotive state with a heavy dose of advanced manufacturing.
Please come back and finish this dialogue because it is important. I want to, patronizingly, I want to thank you for bringing back a good feeling to South Carolina. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Good to see you.
Thank you very much.
Good to see you, Roger. Thanks,
very
Bob.
much. Thank
for being
you.
on the program. Until next week, I'm Chris. Good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by the Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. NOVANT Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care, when and where you need it. Sonoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.org.